Let's take a look at this first calendar, which is the Babylonian Sumerian calendar, which was a lunar solar calendar with years consisting of 12 lunar months, each beginning when a new crescent moon was first sighted low on the western horizon at sunset, plus an intercalary month inserted as needed by decree. And just for the sake of clarity, the lunisolar calendar is essentially a system that combines the motions or effects of the sun and moon. It employs a calendar year divided according to the phases of the moon, but adjusted in average length to fit the length of the solar cycle. Our next calendar is the Egyptian calendar, and Egyptian coming from the word Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is the Hebrew word for, or I should say the name of the son of Ham, who was the son of Noah. And so the Egyptians kept a solar 365-day year calendar with an intercalary month of 5 days. And isn't it interesting that we're only a few hundred years after the flood of Noah, and these cultures who come from the sons of Noah are already practicing their calendars and keeping time in a way that is not congruent with what their grandfather, Noah, would have taught them. Alright, so our next culture is the Assyrian culture. And the Assyrians kept a solar calendar. Asher is where we get the word Assyrian from. Asher was the son of Shem, who was the son of Noah. And these were all descendants of Noah. And Noah would have gotten all this information from his father Lamech. Lamech would have received it from his father Methuselah. And Methuselah was given all the writings that Enoch wrote down from Enoch, his father. So we have the succession of wisdom and instruction and how to keep time originating from Enoch and being kept and disseminated to the progeny after the flood. Our next culture is going to be the Persian culture, and they kept a luni-solar system. Then we have the Greeks, and the Greeks were on a lunar 354-day year. The Greek calendars began in most states of ancient Greece, and almost every state had a different rendition of a lunar reckoning with no intercalary days at all. Now we move to the next culture, which would have been the Romans, and they were initially a lunar-based calendar system, and then they transitioned to a lunisolar calendar, which is commonly known as the Julian calendar. The Julian calendar, which was proposed by Julius Caesar in 46 BC, was a reform of the Roman calendar. This calendar became the predominant calendar in the Roman Empire, and subsequently most of the Western world for more than 1600 years. However, in 1582, Pope Gregory XIII modified it to reduce the average length of the year from 365.25 days to 365.2425 days, and thus corrected the Julian calendar's drift against the solar year. Worldwide adoption of this revised calendar, which became known as the Gregorian calendar, took place over the subsequent centuries, first in Catholic countries and then in Protestant countries of the Western Christian world. It is still in use today. The Jewish calendar is lunisolar, which means that it's regulated by the positions of both the moon and the sun. It usually consists of 12 alternating lunar months of 29 and 30 days each, except for Heshvan and Kislev, which sometimes have either 29 or 30 days, and totals 353, 354, or 355 days per year, which falls in line with exactly what Moses recorded in the Book of Jubilees regarding the following of the moon for your months and your days and your years. It's going to come in 10 days too soon, which results in your year being completed 10 days too early. So the present Hebrew calendar is the result of a process of development with a very heavy Babylonian influence. The names of the months, which were derived from the Babylonian exile, are Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, and just an FYI, the rabbis named the fourth biblical month after the name of the Sumerian and Babylonian deity Tammuz, a goddess of fertility. Tammuz is mentioned only once in Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 14, and is linked to the worship of Tammuz. The prophet Ezekiel was taken to the entrance of the gate of the temple of Yahweh to see the women sitting there weeping for Tammuz, while the elders were secretly carrying on their idolatrous worship. Isn't that lovely? Continuing on with the names of the Jewish months, we have Av, Elul, Tishrei, Heshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shevat, and Adar. A 13th month is added every few years, which is not mentioned or instructed anywhere in the scriptures. Oral traditions and rabbinic writings do not hold authority over the words of our Creator to do so. Karaite Jews use the ripening of the barley to decide whether to add an extra month to the year. Adding a 13th month is not described anywhere in the scriptures, nor are we to look for apparent witnesses like the ripening of barley. Ascertaining when the new crescent moon arrives is not instructed nor mentioned in connection with timekeeping anywhere in the scriptures. These are all man-made, dare I say pagan, traditions that have only solidified the prophecies located in Jubilees chapter 6. And as for what Yahweh reminded and commanded Moses regarding the head or beginning of the year, something that Enoch already knew, it was to be in the same month as Passover and unleavened bread. This is the context for the following passage. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month shall be to you the beginning of months. It is the first to you among the months of the year." Judaism teaches that the new year starts in Tishri, which is their 7th month according to their lunar calendar. This is illogical and incorrect. Rachel Elier is an Israeli professor of Jewish philosophy at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and she specializes in the Dead Sea Scrolls and ancient Israelite calendrical studies. Judaism believes Rosh Hashanah is when the first year starts, which is the first of Tishri, the 7th month. Professor Elier states that this custom was first mentioned and written down in the Mishnah and was practiced orally in 2nd century BCE. In one of her recorded video expositions, she asserts that the Hebrews who wrote the scriptures that were discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls believed that time is holy, eternal, pre-calculated, and based on a solar calendar. They believed that time was not for humans to dictate, and that time was brought from heaven to earth via angels to Enoch. They recognized that it was pre-calculated and had nothing to do with the moon, which is based solely on observation. The calendar is the basis of the covenant, and many angelic interactions took place on feast days within this calendar. She continues saying, "The rabbis were involved in nothing less than a reinvention of Judaism. They were closing an old world based on prophecy and angelic revelation, and opening the sacred canon to human reinterpretation. To many of the Jews of the first millennium BCE, all the texts had been equally holy. The excluded Book of Enoch or Book of Jubilees were certainly not considered less sacred than the Book of Judges or Esther or Daniel. Yet the excluded texts, close to a dozen major works, were not just abandoned, but excised, as if they were a malignant growth." She then goes on to quote a latter 1st century rabbi saying, "Whoever reads them," declared Rabbi Akiva, one of the foremost sages involved in the process, "will have no place in the world to come." She goes on to say that there was a power struggle between the old priestly order that believed its rulings to be divinely inspired and an emerging class of rabbis espousing a different narrative, one which gave human reason and laws a role in shaping the religion. For centuries, the Israelites had marked time according to a solar calendar drawn up by the priestly caste, but regarded as divinely inspired. The calendar emulated the pattern set by God when he created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th. Sasha Stern is a professor of Rabbinic Judaism and head of the Department of Hebrew and Jewish Studies. He specializes in ancient and medieval Jewish history, with an interest in time, calendars, and chronology. Sasha has a published article online that I'm actually just going to pull up and read right from, and we're going to see what his opinion is regarding the heavy Babylonian influence on Orthodox Judaism's calendar. So this article is entitled "The Babylonian Calendar and the Bible." When ancient Israel fell under the dominion of great empires, its calendar was radically altered. This is because in ancient societies, time and calendar were mainly controlled by political rulers. So we find that in most of the Hebrew Bible, the months of the year are only numbered and hardly ever named. But after the Babylonian exile, in the books of Zechariah, Esther, Ezra, and Nehemiah, Babylonian month names suddenly appear and become quite frequent. The Babylonian months of Nisan, Sivan, Elul, Kislev, Tevet, Shavat, and Adar are used either on their own or alongside numbered months. Nisan, in the spring, is consistently equated in these books with the first month of Exodus. Nisan indeed was the first month of the Babylonian calendar. The use of Babylonian month names, which later became standard in the Jewish calendar, is hardly surprising in the context of the post-exilic period. The Babylonian calendar originated in Babylonia, which is in southern Iraq, in the early 2nd millennium BCE, spread to the rest of Mesopotamia in the late 2nd millennium BCE, and then became, in the 1st millennium BCE, the official calendar of the great empires of Assyria, Babylonia, and Persia, in use across the whole Near East. The Jews, under Persian rule, adopted it as their own calendar, as did many other peoples in the Persian Empire. The Jews adopted not only Babylonian month names, but also the entire Babylonian calendar. This calendar was lunar, with each month beginning at the site of a new moon. Since 12 lunar months are approximately 11 days shorter than the solar year, the Babylonian calendar was intercalated, or evened out, every 2 or 3 years by the addition of a 13th month, usually by duplicating the 12th month, Adar, and less frequently by duplicating the 6th month, Elul. This allowed the lunar system to catch up with the sun and the seasons. This calendar may have been quite similar to the original Israelite one. No, it actually wasn't. Unfortunately, this guy doesn't know Rachel Elior or Enoch because he's wrapped up in Judaism, but we'll continue on, which was most likely also lunar. Indeed, this may have helped the Jews to adopt it without qualms. That Jews of the post-exilic period were using the official imperial calendar to determine the dates of biblical festivals is evident, at least from the Passover papyrus from Elephantine, a Jewish colony in southern Egypt. This document indicates that in 419 BCE, Jews at Elephantine observed the festivals of Passover and unleavened bread during the first month of the Babylonian calendar Nisan, in accordance with the Pentateuch's prescription that these festivals be observed in the first month of the year. This practice presumably continued right into the Hellenistic period, when the Babylonian calendar was still largely used for official purposes by the Aramaic-speaking peoples of the Near East. But after the Jewish Hasmonean state broke off from its Hellenistic Seleucid overlords in the mid-2nd century BCE, the Jews no longer had any reason to comply with the calendar of distant Babylon, and their calendar soon acquired distinct features. Although the Babylonian month names were retained, as in the books of Maccabees, the calendar was intercalated at different times. Only the month of Adar, but not Elul, would be intercalated. Still, many Babylonian features remained central to the Jewish calendar, as the Talmud later remarked. Rabbi Hanina said, the month names came up with them, with the exiles from Babylon, and that was out of Jerusalem Talmud. In 2 Chronicles chapter 13, we can read about a civil war taking place between the northern house of Israel and the southern house of Judah. Israel had fallen into idolatry and worshipped Jeroboam's golden calves, and had removed the Levitical priests, who were the rightful ministers of Yahweh's covenant, replacing them with others who were not of the Levitical order. This was seen as forsaking Yahweh and his covenant. Let's read about it. And now you profess to resist the kingdom of the Lord in the hand of the sons of David, and you are a great multitude, and with you are golden calves, which Jeroboam made you for gods. Did you not cast out the priests of the Lord, the sons of Aaron, and the Levites, and make to yourselves priests of the people of any other land? Whoever came to consecrate himself with a calf of the herd and 7 rams, he forthwith became a priest to that which is no God. But we have not forsaken the Lord our God, and his priests, the sons of Aaron, and the Levites, who minister to the Lord. And in their daily courses they sacrifice to the Lord whole burnt offering, morning and evening, and compound incense, and set the showbread on the pure table. And there is the golden candlestick, and the lamps for burning, to light in the evening. For we keep the charge of the Lord God of our fathers, but you have forsaken him. And behold, the Lord and his priests are with us at our head, and the signal trumpets to sound an alarm over us. Children of Israel, fight not against the Lord God of our fathers, for you will not prosper. Unfortunately, this zeal to preserve the Levitical priesthood had an expiry date, as the southern kingdom of Judah partook in the same atrocities under the occupation of the Greeks. Forsaking the Father included forsaking his appointed priesthood. Anyone stepping in who wasn't from the lineage of Aaron or politically usurping this office through force has never been accepted by the Father. I want to dig a little more into some of the history where we can see how Israel's calendar and priesthood were changed. In 175 BCE, Antiochus, a Greek descendant of Alexander the Great, conquered Jerusalem. The Greeks held to a lunar calendar which started in the autumn. Historical data reveals that the high priesthood remained in the progeny of the Zadokites from the time of Zadok up until the rise of the Hasmoneans in around 171 to 167 BCE. It was at this time that the Zadok priesthood was usurped and when times and laws were changed in Israel. The house of Zadok occupied the priesthood through much of the Second Temple period, from Jehoshua ben Jehozadak after the exile, down to Simon II, the very same priest that the writer of Ecclesiasticus praised in Ecclesiasticus chapter 50. Simon II's eldest son, Onias III, and his usurping second son, Jason, who introduced the program of Hellenization that eventually led to the Maccabean revolt. The author of 1st Maccabees regarded the Maccabean revolt as a rising of pious Jews against the Seleucid king who had tried to eradicate their religion, and against the Jews who supported him. The Seleucid Empire was a Greek state in Western Asia during the Hellenistic period that existed from 312 BC to 63 BC. The author of 2nd Maccabees presented the conflict as a struggle between Judaism and Hellenism, words that this author was the first to use. Modern scholarship tends to the second view. Most modern scholars argue that the king was intervening in a civil war between traditionalist Jews in the countryside and Hellenized Jews in Jerusalem. According to Joseph P. Schultz, modern scholarship considers the Maccabean revolt less as an uprising against foreign oppression than as a civil war between the Orthodox and Reformist parties in the Jewish camp. In the conflict over the office of high priest, traditionalists with Hebrew and Aramaic names like Onias contested against Hellenizers with Greek names like Jason or Menelaus. Other authors point to social and economic factors in the conflict. What began as a civil war took on the character of an invasion when the Hellenistic kingdom of Syria sided with the Hellenizing Jews against the traditionalists. As the conflict escalated, Antiochus prohibited the practices of the traditionalists, thereby, in a departure from usual Seleucid practice, banning the religion of an entire people. The Hasmonean bureaucracy was filled with men with Greek names, and the dynasty eventually became very Hellenized to the annoyance of many of its more traditionally minded Jewish subjects. The Hasmoneans accepted the Greek lunar calendar, and were not from the lineage of Aaron or Zadok, and were considered traitors, not liberators, as is commonly thought in religious circles, by the Levitical priests, who called themselves the Sons of Light, because of their acceptance of the lunar calendar. The Hasmoneans were referred to as the Sons of Darkness because of their acceptance and enforcement of the Babylonian-based lunar calendar.